very hard to see, but I'm super excited and grateful to be here to talk a little bit with you all today. Parents Helping Parents is near and dear to my heart. The organization is phenomenal. The things that they do for parents is words can't describe. So I'm grateful. They have done nothing but support this community, and I am just happy to be here and to give back in any way I can. My name is Kyearra Morris. I represent a facility called Stonegate Center. Really briefly, Stonegate Center is a residential treatment facility located in little bit outside of Fort Worth, Texas, in a little town called Azle, Texas. It's absolutely beautiful. We have an all-men facility and an all-women's facility, 90 days. Minimum day is 45. We're in network with most major insurance, and we're just here to help in any way we can. So if you have any more questions about Stonegate specifically, I would love to answer those for you. Just let me know. My email, I'm sure Derek will put it in the comments below, and give them my information, and I'm here at your...
What's the website?
It's stonegatecenter.com. And my email is firstname@stonegatecenter.com. And I don't know who this is all going to, but you're more than welcome to have my cell phone as well. Okay. But just to start out, I typically prefer to do things interactive and fun. So this was a little challenging for me. Virtual meetings are a little different. You're not really speaking, and you don't have the feel of the audience or the group participating. And so I encourage you all to ask questions. Let me know if I can be of service in any way, form, or fashion. I'm more than willing to stop and answer any specific questions you have, because that's what I want you to know is I'm here for you, and no other reason but that. So I will pretense everything tonight by saying I am not an expert. I do not have any letters behind my name, or fancy letters, I should say. I am literally a compassionate person that really cares and is passionate about what I do. And what I do specifically is I help people who are struggling with substance abuse and their families find the resources and the help that they need. And that's my passion, and that's what I do. I'm no expert, but like I said, I'm here and available, and I do the research on resources in the community. So I wanted to talk a little bit about tonight and what I'm going to speak about. And if you are new to this group or new to addiction in any way, form, or fashion, if you're just now getting your feet wet and exploring options out there for a loved one that you might think has a problem, or someone that has had a problem in the past and you're looking for new resources, or someone that you're just here to support, we're going to talk a little bit about what a continuum of care is, specifically levels of care in regards to finding and seeking treatment for those loved ones. I will start by saying that there are 4 different levels of care typically when you're looking at finding resources for someone struggling. Those range from detox to inpatient residential to partial hospitalization, into intensive outpatient and outpatient aftercare services. Typically when people contact me, it's either before a crisis, during a crisis, or just past a crisis. They're usually calling and saying, what do I do now? What can I do? Who do I call? Where do they need to go? Those sorts of questions. And that's what I really thrive in doing, is finding those resources in those crisis situations. And typically my first question to the parents is tell me what's going on and tell me where they are now, just so I have a little back history of what I'm working with and what kind of role that the parents are really playing. Typically speaking, addicts don't really contact me. It's usually a loved one. So that's where Parents Helping Parents is phenomenal in being that middle person, that support group, because they are the ones that are reaching out for the loved ones. And so it'll be the mom on the phone at 2 o'clock in the morning, or the dad or the wife, early mornings, making those calls after they've done a phone call that their husband or their son is in jail, and they need that next step. And so we work together as a team here in Oklahoma. All the professionals in the community work together to just connect all of those resources, so we're all knowing, meaning what's that next step? We have an answer for you. So typically, at a point of crisis, if your loved one has come to the point where they know they need help and they need to know what their next step is, typically speaking, that next step is going to be detox. We'll talk a little bit more about detox. Typically, depending on the substance, it's going to be a 3 to 5 day inpatient. If it's severe alcohol, it can go up to 7 to 10 days, depending on what level of care they need medical necessity for. There's detoxes all across the state. A lot of treatment facilities have detoxes as well. That's typically that first point where you're like, they've been using for 10 years and now we want to get them help and they want help. So we're going to take them to a detox. After that 3 to 5, 7 to 10 day range where they've completed a detox program, which is also known as medical stabilization, they will then be suggested to go to a residential level of care. And what that means is that's actually a step down level of care for medical necessity. It doesn't sound right, but it is. A detox is going to be your highest level of care, medical necessity, and then your residential is going to be your step down level of care. And so just to pretense that, Stonegate Center is a residential treatment facility, meaning these people have already been detoxed, they're medically stable, they are ready to go to treatment, ready for that next step. Typically, those can range from usually 21 days up to 8 months, a year, depending on the program. Generally speaking, your next level of care would be your partial hospitalization, also known as PHP. I'm going to throw a little lingo out there for y'all tonight, just so you get a better understanding when you're talking to people. Like, you call me and you're like, okay, my son, he's going through residential treatment right now. What's our next steps? Well, depending on what he's doing in residential treatment, his next step level of care would be partial hospitalization. If you want to know what partial hospitalization is, it is typically 20 or more hours of treatment to where they go to a facility. They do typically, sometimes it's 4 days a week in the daytime, or sometimes they have programs that are in the evening. And it's, like I said, 4 days a week, 20 plus hours. It's a lot of group therapy. It is the level down from 24/7 residential care. Some treatment facilities are licensed as a continuum of care, which means they provide detox, residential, and PHP on site. And some also go all the way as far as to IOP and outpatient, which we'll talk a little bit more about as well. But so your child has gone through detox. They've gone through, let's just say on average, a 28, 30-day treatment in residential treatment. Then their next level of care would have been the partial hospitalization. And that's that 20 plus hours. And typically they go home, or in what I would like to say is the right way, they go to some sort of structured sober living for that long-term successful recovery. And then you say, okay, my son has completed 3 to 4 weeks of PHP. He's in this sober living house. What does he need to do now? The next level of care would be your intensive outpatient, also known as an IOP program. Typically, IOPs are 9 to 12 hours a week. Some are 2 nights a week, sometimes 3. Those can also be daytime programs as well. They're structured, they're group, mainly in a group setting, some individual, but that is your IOP program. And typically people go to an IOP program in conjunction with sober living. And then a step down level of care from that would be your outpatient programs. Outpatient programs are also part of your aftercare plan. That can be anything from an LADC, which is a licensed alcohol and drug counselor, LPC, LCSW, LMFT. A lot of times if you see couples where the husband has gone to treatment or the wife has gone to treatment, a lot of times they'll recommend their aftercare plan to see a licensed marriage and family therapist, just so they can get that aspect taken care of as well. And that also includes your outpatient psychiatric, if you're seeing a psychiatrist, medication management, those sort of actual medical necessities as well. That is all included in your outpatient. So we've kind of gone over what a continuum of care is and those levels specifically. But I really wanted to hone in and talk to you about, I talk to a lot of parents on a daily basis, and they really start questioning, well, does my child need residential? Do I have to ship my child off to rehab, quote unquote, is what I hear a lot of them say. And we like to, say that we're not a rehab. We are a treatment facility treating all aspects of that person. Whether it's spiritual, whether it's medical, physical, psychological, whatever the case might be, we're going to treat all aspects of that individual during those 30 days that we might get in residential treatment. With that being said, there are those situations that come up where residential levels of care might not be accurate for your loved one. And so typically speaking, these things can be assessed with a simple phone screening. These phone screenings are typically done by admissions people. I've been able to do those as well. I know Derek has done several as well, just to kind of figure out what level of care that individual needs. A good resource is the ASAM, just to kind of determine what level of care. But for those parents, because I know my audience and I know that you're parents and I know that you might not be up on clinical lingo, I wanted to break it down simple for you. There are tons of people in this community that do what I do every single day for the passion of helping others. This is not something that we charge for. This is not something that we get paid for. This is something that we absolutely do because we want to see people recover. We want to see families restored. We want to see people get healed, and start walking that process and helping the families. And so when I say that I am here and available to you, it's not just me. There are tons of people here in the city area, tons of people that are in the AMP group that are willing to meet you where you are, answer those questions, find out with a simple phone screening of simple questions. And this can be with you as a parent or a loved one, or typically we like to do those phone screenings with the actual individual that's needing help, but we know that sometimes that's not possible. And so we want to make sure that we're doing our due diligence and finding out what the needs are and meeting those needs. So if I have a mother that calls me and she says, my son did 90 days of residential treatment at a facility. He was out for 6 months. He was doing amazing in sober living, seeing an outpatient provider, and something made him mad. He lost his job and he's relapsed and been gone for a week and just has been using, basically. Has relapsed severely for the last week. Do I have to send him back to detox? Do they need to go back to residential treatment? And I just send them to an IOP program and get them back into another sober living? What is my next step? And so that's where I myself and tons of other resources, like I said, are able to give you guidance, hold your hand, walk you through. We know the lingo, we know the questions to ask. We know what the next steps are. And so in that instance, I would probably say that if I'm unable to speak to the actual child, the son, I would speak to the mom and I'd ask the mom, what do you know about his use? What do you know about his current use? Tell me everything in his past. Does he have any co-occurring issues, anxiety, depression? What substance is he using? Those sort of questions. Is he suicidal? Does he have a plan? Do you think that he would harm himself or someone else? Does he have legal? These are all questions that are asked during this simple 15 to 20 minute phone screening. But I can guarantee you at the end of that phone screening that you're going to know your next step. You're going to know who you need to call, and what you need to ask, and where your son's going to go. By the end of that phone conversation. And so typically speaking, I would suggest that they get a medical detox, a medical stabilization, even if it's been a week and he's, binged that entire week, or he's, relapsed and, used heavily that entire week. Always, always, always recommend to get some sort of medical evaluation, and that would mean detox. Now, if he has relapsed, he went out and he drank one night, he got kicked out of his sober living, and he really needs someone to talk to, of course, he's not going to meet criteria for detox. He's not going to meet criteria for residential treatment. He's going to meet criteria possibly for a PHP, which is a partial hospitalization program, or an IOP or an outpatient visit. And typically speaking, those can, it just changes on a case-by-case basis. And I would just guarantee you to call and ask and kind of give a background to the medical, to the detox. They're going to tell you pretty much over the phone whether to bring your child on in, or if your child can just call a PHP program in the morning, that sort of thing. So like I said, before, during, and after crisis, we can answer any of those levels of care questions, typically with a phone screening. I wanted to talk briefly about another question that gets brought up in this typical crisis conversation with a loved one is insurance, or how is this funded? How do I pay for this? What's my next steps? Do I have to get a loan? Am I gonna have to, refinance my house? Like, what do I need to do? Am I financially responsible for this, or is my son or my loved one financially responsible for this? And the answer to all those questions is, I don't know. I don't know until we take in all of what's going on, the circumstances. And typically speaking, if you have the means to private pay for treatment, there's no boundaries. There's no obstacles. There's very little obstacles that you have to hurdle over in order to get your loved one help if you're private paying. Most people, however, or the majority of people, don't have the ability to do that. And so that's where a lot of the complex hurdles, the obstacles that you have to go over get thrown in. But I will say that insurance is getting better. So if you're that individual that your loved one has an insurance policy and you would like to utilize those insurance benefits in order to seek treatment, I want to talk a little bit about that. But before I get into that, I want to ask Eric, are there any questions from anyone?
Not yet.
Okay, perfect. I'm going to dibble dabble a little bit into insurance. It gets really tricky, and just pretense this on, I'm not an expert. I'm not an insurance provider. I am in no way, form, or fashion any bit legal, but I will talk to you a little bit about what I know about insurance personally. At Stonegate, we are in network with several major insurances. And for whatever insurance you have, I can guarantee you there's probably some facility across the United States that is reputable, that is in network with your insurance. So it's always an option, and there's always an option to use out of network benefits as well. However, I will tell you, it is a good thing to note and to understand and have that information readily available for your loved one. So for the sense that he gets into detox, you need to have that insurance information so you can start making those phone calls to figure out what your next steps are. Even if it's just a quick photocopy picture on your phone, front and back of the insurance card, that helps out tremendously. A lot of insurances or treatment centers say, we're in network with all these facilities, we accept your insurance. That might be fine and dandy, and that might be accurate. However, every insurance policy is different. And I can guarantee you that I will probably have on any given day, one or two that their insurance doesn't even cover substance abuse or behavioral health. It is a clause in their policy that the insurance does not cover. And so if you have, for instance, Oklahoma, I should say, is probably 85% Blue Cross Blue Shield. However, there's a good 15% of those policies that substance abuse and mental health are not even included in. And so I want to make sure that you all understand how insurance is, and how when people and treatment centers and detoxes and IOPs and outpatient providers say that they accept a certain insurance, that doesn't mean that your insurance covers their service. So typically speaking, in a roundabout way, insurance, if it covers substance abuse and mental health, it is going to cover a medical detox if it is medical necessary. Meaning if it is alcohol, heroin, opioids for any reason, of course, if the woman is pregnant, those sort of situations are all medical necessity. They're still going back and forth on whether or not meth is a medical necessity for detox. However, I think that they're moving forward with allowing Derek shakes his head, but I just heard wind of it from several detoxes that I currently work with, that they are able to bill for meth as a medical necessity. So just throwing that out there. If anyone has any feedback on that.
Can people call ahead to see what their deductible might be?
Absolutely. I encourage everyone to know what their insurance policy is. And if you're a parent and your child is on your policy, call, find out. It's anonymous. I mean, when I say anonymous, yes, they're going to know you called, but they're not going to deny you treatment or deny your loved one treatment because you called and asked about your substance abuse and mental health benefits or coverage. It's always good to know, especially if you have any inclination, any signs, any family history, anything that would lead you to the thought of needing those that coverage. And that could be just for your own sake, because we all know when our loved one goes to treatment, we need to take care of ourselves. And that means going and seeking an outpatient provider to process our own thoughts and our own what we're going through, as well as any medical necessities that are needed, whether it's psychiatry, medications. There's so many different options for treatment out there. The industry has found a way for insurance to cover it, but sadly, insurance still dictates it. And when I say that, I mean, for detox, although I personally think that someone detoxing should be inpatient for at least 5 days, there are insurances out there that will discharge someone in 3 days and saying that they're medically stable when they've used heroin or opioids for 10 years. 3 days is not enough. They get to a residential treatment facility and they're not medically stable. So guess what we have to do in return? Send them back to get medically stable. But they have to come to us first, and we have to say they don't meet this level of care, residential level of care. They need to go inpatient to medical stabilization again. And typically insurance covers that, and it's billed on a medical side. So RTC, which is also known as residential, which is what Stonegate is, just to give you a roundabout idea, insurance dictates treatment there as well. Sadly enough, it's typically 14 to 21 days residential anywhere you go these days. I would be shocked if you get more than 30 days of residential level of care from any insurance policy across the board. Now, don't get me wrong, medical necessity once again comes to play. And if there is a medical necessity for them to be residential, that's 24/7 care at a facility. That's not a hospital. These are standalone residential treatment facilities, not in a hospital. If they get more than 30 days, they have to have a lot going on. They have to prove that this client is not being successful in going to groups, maintaining their sobriety. They have a plan. They still have means and a way to use. And so there's a lot that has to be justified. Typically, insurance covers 14 to 21 days at a residential level of care. And then they come in and say, okay, he's doing pretty good. I think now we're going to go ahead and say that he can go home and go to a PHP, which is a partial hospitalization, which means they go to treatment in the daytime and they go home at night, or to sober living. Some facilities, like I mentioned earlier, are licensed for multiple levels of care. Just to give you an idea, most residential treatment facilities are also licensed for partial hospitalization and an intensive outpatient. Some are licensed for detox as well, all under one roof. And so they have the ability to kind of, just as much as insurance manipulates and dictates treatment, the residential facility can come in and say, okay, we understand that, you're only going to, approve 12, 14 days of RTC, 21 tops, and then you're going to drop them down to PHP. Well, guess what? We know that this person isn't going to be successful on an outpatient basis. So we're going to keep them here in a residential setting, but you're just going to pay us partial hospitalization. And then as well as IOP, which is intensive outpatient. Some facilities will keep them for all of those levels of care. And then as part of their aftercare plan, they're going to send them out the door with a solid outpatient provider, whether that's a alcohol and drug therapist, a regular counselor, LMFT, psychiatrist, med. They're going to set all of that up prior to them leaving residential care, and as well as a sober living, typically speaking. That is the only way that you get insurance, to maximize the insurance benefits typically. And I wanted to touch base that, so that's private pay, private insurance obstacles. And I don't even want, and I couldn't even begin to touch base on state funding and indigent. They don't have the ability to pay. They don't have insurance policies. Oklahoma has a program that you have to complete the ODAZL to get on a state waiting list. And I think last it was 6 to 8 weeks. And it is an absolute nightmare. And it's pregnant women go to the top, heroin IV users go to the top. There's different levels. They have to complete different meetings and programs and have the ODAZL done in order to even get on the list. And depending on how well they do with those outpatient visits is whether or not they even stay on the list. So that's a whole nother gamut and ball game. But I want to wrap that up to say that there are resources out there. There is help if you are, struggling with a loved one and you're looking for resources or you're looking for help. There's AMP resources here in Oklahoma. That is a networking group of professionals in the industry that are on the grind every single day trying to get people help. And we have resources and connections across the state, as well as Arkansas, Texas, Kansas, just pretty much anywhere you really need. And we're willing to help and answer those questions about levels of care, funding, how do I get my loved one help, any of those sorts of questions. I think that about wraps it up on my end as far as levels of care goes, and kind of how insurance dictates that. I would love to answer any questions that anyone has specific to anything I've talked about tonight. And just know that, like I said, I am a resource. If I cannot help you, I have someone in my little black book of resources that can. If I don't know the answer, I can get it for you.
This is the long, awkward pause while we see if anybody's got any other questions. I need like some Jeopardy music.
I know.
So while we're waiting for, you've also got resources in the North Dallas area?
Absolutely. All over Texas. Stonegate is in Texas. And so even the questions I can't answer or the resources I don't know, I know tons of people and resources in Texas that can get that.
Yeah. So for the person that asked that in the Zoom room about resources in the North Dallas area, what I would encourage you to do is go to the Facebook video where you can read these comments and get Kyearra's email address.
Absolutely.
And that way you guys could communicate directly about what those resources may be.
Absolutely.
Any other final questions as we're kind of wrapping things up? Did that like go?
Do a little dance. No, I think this one kind of flickered a little bit, but it wasn't bad at all.
I'm not sure how long the battery life is.
It'll die in just a few minutes.
You're Kyearra at?
Yes. Kyearra at stonegatecenter.com. Correct.
I'm giving this person your direct email address.
Perfect. And when I say there's a team of people that are ready and available 24/7, my phone goes off 24/7. I have a counterpart, Kinsey. Her phone rings all the time. We have tons of people in AMP resources. Don't hesitate to call or text when that crisis comes, preferably before the crisis or after. We're available. We're ready to answer any questions, have resources. And don't ever hesitate to think your question isn't worthy. It is. We've heard them all. And most of the time, it's a very simple answer. But there is hope. There's help. And we're just here. So I'm excited and grateful for the opportunity to come on.
All right, I'm going to give it just a second for any others.
For all 5,000 followers right now. I'm just kidding.
Chauncey needs to chill.
Chauncey, I love Chauncey has a
She's
helpline.
she's commenting all over the place.
Oh, Chauncey has a helpline.
You're much loved, Chauncey.
Yes. So go ahead and give her a call. She loves all of the phone calls. So.
All right. I'm going to take the camera back for a few minutes. All right, Kyearra, thank you again for joining us. We appreciate obviously all your information.
My pleasure.
Reach out, find those email addresses and the links to Stonegate Center on the Facebook thread, and be sure you come back 2 weeks from tonight, 11/18. I think that's the date. 11/18, 7 p.m. We will be right back here doing this again. So thanks everybody for joining us. Hope you have a great night.